Hello, everyone. Welcome to Global Hack Week. I'm super excited to be here for making better hacks faster with GitHub Copilot. This is one of my favorite development tools, and I hope y'all enjoy learning more about this as well. Before we get started, I just wanted to draw your attention to the registration link in the chat. This allows you to register your attendance with Major League Hacking, and you're then eligible for any prizes or swag we'll be giving away for attendance and participation throughout Global Hack Week. I hope y'all are having as much fun as I am so far. And without further ado, let's get started. So today we're going to be focusing on a cool AI development tool called GitHub Copilot. It's one of my favorites, and I use it pretty often in my day-to-day development life. Before we kind of dive into what GitHub Copilot is, and a little bit more about how to use it in your projects, I want to introduce myself. My name is Gabriella. I'm a coach here at Major League Hacking. I use she, her pronouns, and a fun fact about me is that when I was getting my first passport, the Department of State actually misspelled my name on it, so I had to send it back to the government and have them reissue me a passport so I could actually travel. But now that that's all solved, my passport's good to go, and I'm able to travel, which is nice. So now we're going to dive into GitHub Copilot. So this is kind of what the GitHub Copilot like chat interface looks like. Essentially what GitHub Copilot does is allow you to get things done faster. If you're ever at a hackathon, you're oftentimes crunched for time. You're trying to get a lot of work done within 24, 36, or maybe even 48 hours. And what GitHub Copilot does is essentially helps you like supercharge your development, answer questions, and kind of debug at a rate that's like a lot faster than some other ways. I really like GitHub Copilot because rather than using another LLM, such as like ChatGPT for debugging or coding, it's all in line and it's very development focused. So I found it to be both faster and more accurate than kind of switching between my IDE and another LLM. So yes. So essentially, that is an overview of GitHub Copilot, why I enjoy it. But here's a little bit more about what we'll be diving into today. Essentially, what is GitHub Copilot? Why would you use it? A little bit more details on how you can actually integrate it into your development environment, how you get set up with it. It does take a little while to get access to GitHub Copilot if you don't already have the GitHub Student Developer Pack, but you'll be able to reference this video as well as GitHub Copilot documentation to get everything set up on your own time. And you're more than welcome to go back and kind of watch this recording to guide you through the process once you get access to GitHub Copilot. And lastly, we'll kind of be walking through GitHub Copilot and kind of like a use case scenario. In development, we'll be working through a sample project, some sample errors, and kind of how GitHub Copilot can help you in that debugging process. Okay, let's see. It looks like we have a few questions. You have two GitHubs, one with a college email and one with a personal email, which you use to check in. As far as checking into this specific event through MLH, I would use whichever account you have a pre-existing MLH account with, whichever one you use to sign up for Global Hack Week. But when you're signing up for the Student Developer Pack, you'll want to use your college email because that's what will give you access to the GitHub Student Developer Pack. Yes, awesome. So this is what GitHub Copilot looks like in line. So when you're coding, if you install the GitHub Copilot extension, you're able to have pop-ups on the IDE, which I really enjoy because you're able to use like shorthand commands and ask questions in line while you're coding. And then recommendations or explanations can pop up in line if they're short, which I find to be really helpful when I want to go through the debugging process. It's very seamless. As you can see here, there's a few different use cases. Create a new button component. So if you're trying to build out a website and you don't know the syntax for one particular thing, whether it be because you're using a new library, a new programming language, or maybe you're just a little bit rusty and you kind of like need to remember how to do this, rather than going to Google and just Googling like W3 schools for like some particular HTML walkthrough, you're able to use GitHub Copilot to kind of walk you through the process, and you can ask questions in the chat as well. And then in the middle, you can see /fix my var is undefined. So if you're running into any errors, you're able to use GitHub Copilot with the fix command, and it'll walk you through the debugging process with that rather than just creating something itself. And then on the far right, you can see the explain. It's the /explain in the box, and this is essentially the command that will walk you through a line of code or a whole code block and kind of walk you through like what's happening, what's going on, which I find to be very helpful, especially if you're using kind of like that default template starter code. It can be really confusing to start with, or maybe you're starting a new job and you have like a lot of legacy code you're like walking through to trying to understand that before diving into the code itself. So that could be like a very helpful use case. So here's a little bit about why you should even use GitHub Copilot, what the stats they have found on developers who have used GitHub Copilot, just kind of like a high level overview. 88% of developers feel they're more productive. Developers felt they were 55% faster at coding, more efficient, less frustrated, more fulfilled in their job. All great things. I personally relate to all of these when I'm working on hackathon projects or school projects. GitHub Copilot is a lifesaver and makes things a lot more satisfying and kind of seamless to go through the development process. So essentially, if you're working on a hackathon too, with these levels of productivity, you might be able to get 37 hours worth of work done in just 24 hours. That used to be pretty frustrating, battling debugging demons at 2 a.m. during a hackathon. But with Copilot, that can make your process a lot easier. So now that I've kind of talked about why I love GitHub Copilot, why you might want to use GitHub Copilot, we're going to actually walk into getting it set up, and I'll be answering the student developer pack questions throughout this process. If you don't have the GitHub student developer pack, you can redeem this through a link I'll be giving to y'all. If you don't have an email, I'm not able to get you full access to GitHub Copilot, but they do have a trial run where you can test it out for a week or two, I think, if you don't have a college email. And I will walk you through that here. So essentially, GitHub Copilot is living where you write your code and your IDE in your text editor. Here's a little meme about essentially developers arguing about what real developers use, what real programmers use. And basically, you don't need to be arguing about that. Put the knives away, it's going to be okay, because GitHub Copilot can be used in a lot of different IDEs. I'll be using Visual Studio Code in the browser through GitHub Code Spaces, just because I found it to be a little bit more seamless for workshop purposes. But if you use any of these, you can use GitHub Copilot. And you can also use it in the command hub using the GitHub command line interface, if you're familiar with that. So if you don't have GitHub Copilot, I would install it. Or if you don't have Visual Studio Code, I would install that. That's where you're going to do that here. I'm going to start walking you through essentially how you would do it in Code Spaces. So this is Code Spaces. This is where we will be walking through our development environment. Basically, you're able to take GitHub repositories and open them up in a virtual version of Visual Studio Code in the browser. Just by clicking new code space. But we're not going to do that just yet. But yes, okay. So once you have once you have Visual Studio Code installed, or you're opening up your browser, you need to install the Copilot extension. Let me double check what the name of, what is the name? Okay, Copilot Starter, perfect. So let's go back here. I'm going to create a new code space, and I'm going to go to MLH, and it's going to be Copilot Starter. And we're just going to use the default branch. Everything is configured. We're going to create the code space, and it's creating that right here. All right. Someone asked, is it okay if I do this on VS Code? Yes, that's perfect. That's basically what I'll be running in just in the browser. That's what we recommend for GitHub Copilot, but if you prefer to use a different IDE, that's more than okay as well. GitHub Copilot is asking for, I'm assuming you mean dollars for using it. GitHub Copilot is a paid service if you don't have the student developer pack, which I will show you how to access in a second. If you have the student developer pack, you can access GitHub Copilot for free. Otherwise, you can use a free trial, and then it's a paid service if you're not a student. Is it possible to use Copilot with Bitbucket? I would say no, because it's a different, it's a whole different Git system in Bitbucket. They might have a different version, but that's not what we're walking through today. You're more than welcome to use Codespaces as well. I'd say it's probably one of the faster ways to walk through this tutorial if you want to follow along with me. Okay, so here we have our code. We see everything is loaded up in our development environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to extensions, and then I'm going to type in Copilot. Here we have GitHub Copilot. It should look like this. There's going to be a lot of Copilot things that are popping up in Visual Studio Code. This is just like a browser version of that. I'm going to click install, and then it should be installing that. I'm also going to install, or I guess it installs Copilot Chat at the same time. Perfect. So it looks like those are installed. And as you can see here, we have GitHub Copilot Chat popping up. And then if I open up the app.py file from this repository I just brought in from GitHub, we're able to hit Command or Control, I believe, on PCs, and then our Copilot pop-up comes up. So I'm just going to hit Explain, so you can kind of see it working in real time in the IDE. So here it's explaining everything that's going on. It's quite a lengthy explanation about Flask, and I can open it up in the chat as well. Okay. Are Codespaces included in the student developer pack? I believe so. I think it's included in GitHub Pro, which you receive through the student developer pack. What repository did I use? I will get back to that in just a second. All the recordings from today will be uploaded on the channels, hopefully pretty soon after, like within 12 to 24 hours is usually when it happens. Sometimes we get a little bit backed up if we have a lot of recordings to upload, so soon. And I think that on YouTube, you're able to see them pretty quickly under the live tab. How long does a student developer pack last? Basically, as long as you are enrolled in a university. They will ask you to renew it, I think, every year with either a transcript or a tuition bill or like a class schedule. Okay, so now that we have the extension installed, this is how you would walk through it in VS Code on the desktop. You would just basically type in install extension, and then you would go and search for it like I did. I think that's just like the one extra step. You can see this is what I walked y'all through earlier. Basically, this is what y'all are asking about with the student developer pack. This is Copilot. So if you already have the student developer pack, you just need to activate your Copilot access on the student developer pack site. But if you do not already have the student developer pack, this is where you can sign up for it, which I will send that in the chat. All right. Okay, cool. So I will give everyone a few minutes to sign up for the developer pack or get access, like to activate their Copilot. I'm just going to basically show you what the website looks like. So here you would just click join GitHub education, and it would walk you through process. I think you just click on students, join GitHub education, and it shows you everything. Yeah, so you get 20 gigabytes of code spaces, which is what I'm using, as well as GitHub Copilot. Yes, it looks like they've changed the setup, but this shows you if you're eligible and the docs for applying. It does take a little bit to kind of like activate your student developer pack and get access to GitHub Copilot, but it will take a few days. The link that I'm giving you in the chat should give you relatively expedited access compared to the normal application process for MLH viewers. This is normal. It does take a little bit of time for them to verify. All right. How did I use Copilot in code spaces? So how I do that is I go into code spaces. You should have all of these items on the left-hand column. You'll click on extensions and then just type in Copilot. If you have Copilot activated through your student developer pack and it's added to your specific GitHub account, you should be able to access that whenever a code space opens. Because I have Copilot activated on my GitHub account, basically whenever I open up a new code space, I'm able to activate that extension. So once that extension has been installed and activated on your account, whether you're using the student developer pack or you're not a student, you decide to just purchase GitHub Copilot, you'll be able to use it on code spaces that way. All right. Are there any more questions? If you are not a student, you're not eligible for the student developer pack, but you do have you're able to use a short trial of GitHub Copilot. I don't have a link for that handy right now, but I can share that at the end. As for right now, I'm going to dive back into more of an explanation and walking through the whole process for how you would use it in a development environment. As you can see right here with our test Flask project, we're getting a type error. So what I'll be walking you through is the debugging process, as well as kind of expanding upon our application. Okay, so once you have claimed your student developer pack, we'll go into basically using GitHub Copilot. So you'll clone your repository. I've already done this through GitHub Code Spaces. You'll clone the MLH Copilot starter. I'm going to put this in the chat so y'all are able to utilize this for project. You're able to follow along. All right. If your student developer pack application is pending, you can just follow along by watching the stream. You'll learn about how to use the application, how to use the product, and then in a few days when your access gets approved, you'll be able to start using it in your development. If you would like to follow along later, you can go back to this recording in a few days when it gets enabled. How much time does it take for Copilot to get enabled after claiming and getting verified? Okay. Your access to Copilot should be approved relatively quickly if you already have the student developer pack. So if it's taking a while, that is a little odd. To have it be activated in your VS Code, you need to make sure you are logged into your GitHub account, and it's the GitHub account that's connected to your student developer pack, as well as installing the extension like I showed you earlier. So in your VS Code, you'll have something similar to the extensions page. It should be almost identical to how this is laid out in code spaces. You'll just type in Copilot, and if you have access and are logged into your GitHub profile in your VS Code, you should be able to install it within a few minutes. All right, okay. So after y'all are able to clone the Copilot starter, we're gonna go ahead and open app.py. That's the application I have right here. And I'm gonna have the GitHub Copilot chat right next to it. I'm gonna hit clear. Okay, it's not assisting with that. Let's see. I just wanna open up a new chat, so it's kind of a fresh start. Perfect. So we have all this starter code. I want to get kind of an overview of this whole page, just I understand what's going on. If I had never worked with Flask before, or maybe some of y'all watching have never worked with Flask before, so you kind of understand what's going on. So I'm going to hit Command-I, and then I'm going to type explain, and then have Copilot explain all of this. It's doing it in line. Pretty sure it's going to move to the chat just in a second because it's a lot. or I will open it in the chat because it's a lot. Okay. The provided code is a Python script that uses the Flask framework to create a web application. It imports the Flask module and the time module. So you can see these being imported. It's telling us that Flask is a popular web framework that Python allows developers to build web apps easily. It provides functionalities for routing, handling HTTP requests, and rendering templates, all useful things for web apps. And the time module is a built-in Python function that provides various functionalities to work with time-related operations. In this code, it is used to calculate the number of seconds since the Unix epoch. The script defines a function called seconds since epoch, that's right here, which calculates the number of seconds since the Unix epoch using the time.time function. So here, epoch is being assigned to the time.time function, and it will be returning the current time in seconds since the epoch as a floating point number. The int function is used to convert the floating point number to an integer. So we are returning the epoch, which is the number of seconds since the Unix epoch, and we're returning that as an integer. And then here, finally, in our app.route, which is just the default route at the slash, this is the main root URL of the web app. And this is like when a user is accessing a website, its main root is just slash or index.html if you're using a more basic web app. And at this specific root, this function is going to be executed, and anything that's being returned here will show up on that page. So here we have the seconds function and the handler. This is the function in the handler for the root, and it is calling seconds since epoch. So it's calling this function inside of our seconds function in the root. So we're able to see the number of seconds since the epoch, and it's returning it as a response. So basically, in this code, we're just setting up a Flask web app and a single root, so we're able to access it. But we're getting an error, as you can see right here at the root. All right. So now that we've kind of like walked you through, I've explained this. Basically, this is running the code in action. This is opening up the terminal, which we will do down here. This is the terminal. If you are on code spaces, you can just click down here where it says the X and the caution sign, and you're able to access this. You can see it's all running. I'm going to kill this run just by hitting X. And then here we have just our terminal right here. So the first thing we need to do is type in pip install our requirements. So we're installing all of these requirements in our application. For anyone that's following along, I will paste this into the chat in just a second. I'm going to allow and then run this. Okay, it looks like most of these requirements are already satisfied. Since I've run through this workshop before, some of the requirements are already satisfied. So if you are following along, you already have GitHub Copilot installed locally. You can just use this to work this error with me. All right. So and the next thing we want to run is this. This is going to essentially run our application with debugging on. If you're if you haven't have Python installed in your IDEs, well, you can just click the run, and this will be pretty similar. I think just not using the debugging aspect of that. Okay. All right. Run this one more time. All right, here we have our simple browser. It's popping up. We're still getting our error. Our debugging is giving us a 304 error. So let's walk through and see what's going on. So we have this error that we've been getting for a little while. We don't want that in any hackathon project. So we're going to try one of my favorites, which is just the fix command. And this shows you basically what GitHub Copilot thinks will fix the code. It doesn't always work, but it does give you kind of a starter point. I find this to be pretty similar to Googling whatever error you're getting and finding like a few Stack Overflow pages and trying whatever on that. It doesn't always work, and oftentimes it doesn't, but it kind of guides you a little bit closer to finding a solution in your code. And this, since it's more directed, it will help you fix your problem a little bit faster because it has more context of your direct code. So Copilot is saying the problem is that the seconds function is missing a closing parentheses. Let's see. To fix this, add a closing parentheses after seconds since epoch. I'm curious what. Okay. That's interesting. Let's try highlighting all the code and see what Copilot says this time. This is a great example of Copilot not always being right and sometimes not understanding everything. The code seems to be missing the necessary import statement for the time module. To fix this, you need to add the line import time at the top of the file. This is also wrong because we already had import time. This is interesting. Someone asked, what does having debugging on do for this process? This is what's going to allow us to get all of these helpful comments right here of what's going on with the traceback of the error, as well as we're getting these 304 errors. So you're able to see everything a little bit more clearly. We have this type error right here. So in this instance, because just like typing in fix with the problem is not giving us any particularly helpful information, I'm going to type in command fix, and then I'm going to type in this type error that we're getting in the terminal to see what's going on. Okay, so to fix the issue, you need to convert the integer returned by second since epoch into a string before returning it from the view function. Here's the corrected code. So it's telling us that I need to return string. I need to convert this basically into a string because it won't return as an integer onto the HTML file. So I think that makes sense. So let's try that out. Since we didn't do that inline, it's not going to work inline. So let's refresh this page. Oh, and here we can see it's working now. So GitHub Copilot, once provided a little bit more directed context, was able to solve this problem. So that's pretty cool. All right, so now that we've worked on debugging, I've showed you how to use the fix function and how to add a little bit more directed context for GitHub Copilot if it's not necessarily finding what you're wanting it to find. We're going to move on to actually adding things onto an application. So as you can see here in the slides, we just have the same thing. So if we want to add on to our program, if maybe you have an idea of the different functionalities you want in your program, but aren't quite sure how to go about that, the syntax you need, this is a great way to do this. So here you can see we want to add on a route that shows the hours, since the epoch, because we already have the seconds here. So I'm going to type on here, add a route for the hours since epoch. And we'll see what GitHub Copilot comes up with. All right, so we have hours root, we have an hours function. It's assigning seconds to the seconds function. And then we are finding the hours by just dividing the seconds by 3,600, which makes sense because there are 3,600 seconds in each hour. And then we're returning that variable as a string to make sure we're not getting any more errors. So I'm going to accept that. One slightly annoying thing with GitHub Copilot is sometimes the indenting in Python can get a little bit off. In that case, you just need to bring your code back. Slightly annoying, but I'd say it's worth it for all the benefits you get. So here we go. It looks like that's working. We're going to refresh our browser. So this is at the default root again, but to see what we just did, we'll have to go to the hours root. So here we are at the hours root, and we are getting hours. So I'm going to take this one step further, and I'm going to basically just Google this times 3,600 and see what we get. So we are getting this, which is what I believe we were getting at our original root. Yep, that is what we're getting at our original root. If not, it's like a little bit higher because we had a rounding for our like new assignment. But I would say it's pretty accurate. All right. So now that we've worked on adding on an hours root, I think we should maybe do a minutes one as well. I think that's a kind of like logical next step. Can you do the same thing for a minutes root? Okay, so here we have the same thing, except we're dividing by 60 seconds because it's for minutes, not hours, and we're turning it. Okay, so like this. All right. Working on the indexing. I'm going to refresh my page. We are still at the default root here. So now we're going to next go to minutes. All right, perfect. So now we have done both minutes and hours with the help of GitHub Copilot. And I love how we're able to just automatically generate that starter code, whereas you might have had to go on to documentation or like kind of looked around to debug that. So this is a way to kind of like supercharge your productivity. And if you're building out a new app in a language or framework you're unfamiliar with, I think this is a super helpful tool to kind of get that done. All right, let's see what's next on our to-do list. So we've added the route that shows the hours since the epoch. We've done that for the minutes since the epoch as well. Like that's all completed. We're able to see that. I think the only last thing I would maybe want to do is kind of like extend this to days and months. I think like that could be like logical next steps, not necessarily included in our slides, but we're moving along quite well. So I think we can do that. Can you do the same thing for a day and month root? So here it created two roots for us, one for day, one for month. So let's check this real quick. In a day, there are 24 hours. So this is interesting. We are manually calculating the days versus using our hours function. I'm going to specify that I want to use the hour function. Using our hour function. All right. Here we have this. We're calling our hours function, so it's a little bit more simplified for our code. I'm going to make this even more simple, simplify this even more using our hour and day functions, respectively. Once again, it's thinking again. Okay, so we have, here we're using hours, and here we are using our day function. I'm going to accept these changes, fix the indentation one more, and then we'll test it out. Because we're getting slightly more advanced here. And then we might go back and refactor some code, and then I will go answer y'all's questions. Here we go. Okay, let's refresh our browser and go to day and month. Hours is referenced before assignment. Okay, so I think in this instance, what we'll need to do in order to refactor our code is we'll need to put our hours and minutes functions outside of the individual roots. So up here, we see that the second since epoch is outside of an individual root, whereas these functionalities are happening inside of the hours function rather than just having a return statement. So I'm going to basically ask Copilot to refactor so that we are able to do it a little bit more quickly. Can you take the minutes, hours, days, and months functions outside of the roots so we are able to reuse them, having a similar root function structure to the /root. We'll see if that under the Copilot understands. Okay, so here we have hours, minutes, day, and month, and then perfect. Okay, this looks like it makes sense. One thing I am going to do is take hours, minutes, and day, all of this, and I'm basically just going to put it above the root. So here we have seconds since epoch. I'm just going to create this right here. Perfect. Okay. Refresh the page. Hours is referenced before local assignment. Let's see what's going on. We're going to run this again. Sometimes you need to kill and then rerun it to properly see it. But if there's errors I'm not seeing, we can always go through and kind of see what's going on. Okay, so the main directory is working. I'm going to go to day. Okay, let's see. So for day, we are using hours. It's referenced before assignment. Hours is equal to hours. I think we might want to adjust this so it recognizes these all as functions. So it needs to be hour. I think that's the issue, is it was overwriting the function name with the actual return hour. Okay, I think that's it. Debugger looks like it's working. No more errors, question mark. Okay, string and integer. Let's see, hours divided by, okay, I see what's happening now. So basically what is happening is on all of these, we are returning a string inside of the function before we are basically returning them in our web page. And since we are using them multiple times, so for example, we're taking the variable that hour is returning and we're using that in the day or month function, we're not able to divide that to find our new variable because it's returning a string, not an integer. So I'm going to basically talk to GitHub Copilot, select all the code so it's able to basically do its thing. Fix, can you wait to convert anything to a string until it is in our root function. Perfect. Okay. It looks like it's doing that. We're going to accept the changes and refresh the page one more time. And it looks like it's working. Perfect. That's at day. And let's see at month. Perfect. Awesome. So I think we have kind of properly expanded the functionality of this application. I'm going to go through and see if there are any questions. What does debugging on have? What does having debugging on do? I think I talked about that earlier, but basically just provides more insight into your errors. So you're able to better understand it yourself, or you're able to feed more accurate information into GitHub Copilot if you're having issues. Someone found this on GitHub documentation. The activation process for student developer pack takes up to 72 hours. However, it may take longer during peak times, such as the start of a new semester. This is true. So I would just say be patient. And if you already have access to the developer pack, getting access to Copilot should be relatively quick. Once you get it linked to your GitHub account, you get your VS Code linked, and you're able to install that extension. How can I get the GitHub Copilot sticker? So we give these out at in-person Copilot workshops like the one today, but just like in-person at hackathons. And I think we give them out sometimes via mail for Global Hack Week and other events. I don't know for this particular event if we are mailing out GitHub Copilot stickers. I can look more into that later. Okay. Someone asked, what should we choose in suggestions matching public code? So this person is referencing the optionality for GitHub Copilot to reference public code, whether that be a GitHub repository or otherwise. I'd say that this can be very helpful if you're trying to build applications to choose suggestions matching public code, because a lot of times for template or starter code, having it match that public code will be very helpful. But I do want to note that it's very important if you're a student, if you're working on student projects, or if you are working on projects that are going to be going into like a project at work or something like a product you are launching, that it might be a better idea to turn this feature off just to avoid any plagiarism issues, especially if you're in university. I know that a lot of professors have plagiarism detectors on code repositories, and you don't want to be using this and accidentally like accept something that fixes your error. And it turns out that you're just kind of like copying an entire code file from a public code repository. And that question kind of leads me perfectly into the last part of our GitHub Copilot workshop. So essentially, this is where I talk about the next steps about Copilot and why Copilot isn't always right, and you want to have a brain of your own when using Copilot. It's meant to be an AI assistant for a reason, because it's not meant to be the developer replacing your brain when coding. So Copilot is built on OpenAI's GPT-4 model. So it's built on the same GPT model you're using when you're using ChatGPT. It's just a little bit more directed and queried a little bit more specifically to development purposes versus the more broad version you'll see in ChatGPT. And a lot of times you'll notice in ChatGPT, if you've used it for development or debugging help, you have to provide it a lot of context to get accurate answers and help, whereas Copilot already has a lot of that context. So it's easier to find solutions. But with that in mind, Copilot will write bad code, and it's not going to understand what you want every single time. I think we ran into that pretty quickly when I was trying to fix the first error we had. And the first few times I used the /fix command, it wasn't working. I had to provide more context for Copilot to understand what specific error I was looking at and how to fix that. And another thing I feel I should mention is that it only has code samples up to September 2021. As y'all are probably aware, OpenAI is consistently updating ChatGPT and the GPT models. So they're not always going to be super up to date. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but a few times I've asked questions and it said that it has information, but you might want to check because this isn't fully up to date, or this information is out of date. You like go check and see what it is. This is especially important for development work because, as y'all know, there are constantly new libraries, APIs, and kind of syntax differences coming out. And June 2024 to September 2021 is quite an amount of time in the tech world. So make sure you are like double checking, and you can pull aside and Google something if Copilot is giving you something that looks a little bit weird, a little bit outdated, or something that's just like not working if you've tried querying it a few times. I want to really emphasize that you need to read, understand, and edit the code it produces to make sure that it's working properly. If you're a student or you're working on something that is like going to the real world and not just a one-off project, you really need to understand all of the pieces and like what everything is doing. Even if Copilot suggested something and you end up using it, you will need to be able to explain and understand that if it's a project that you're working on for school, a project that you are implementing in industry, whether that be something like a product you're launching or something you're working on at work, you need to understand what it's working, like what each piece of code is doing, how it's working, and like how the code like functions, so you're able to edit it yourself if there are errors or library updates in the future, or you just like frankly need to explain it to your TA, your professor, or your boss or your manager at work. But I have great faith in all of y'all. You're MLH hackers. You work on awesome projects every single weekend. Constantly blown away by what hackers come up with. So I have no doubts you'll do great and utilize this tool to really help you in your development process. But I just wanted to kind of talk about that. I think it's really important to talk about this, not just for Copilot, but for any generative AI or GPT model like technologies. I think this is like a really important topic of conversations, that we're not just kind of like mindlessly selecting things, but rather understanding it. And I think y'all saw that throughout the demo process. I was talking through things and asking questions out loud and kind of making sure that I understood it before clicking accept. And after clicking accept, I tested it every single time to make sure it had the right functionality. And I looked through to see what parts of the code were changing so that I understood what was going on, even if I didn't handwrite the entire application. All right, so now that we have kind of had that, after we've talked about just like generative AI isn't going to replace your work as a developer, just kind of meant to be an assistant. Copilot is a great addition to any hackathon project. It can be there for the entire hackathon, and it can help you deal with complicated code, kind of like really sleep deprived and not understanding things too well because you're really sleepy with a very persistent error. And Copilot is a great addition because it won't even ask for more prizes if you end up winning something at the event. If you want to learn more about GitHub Copilot, here are some resources. I will put these in the chat for y'all to look at later. And now is the time for any questions you may have about GitHub Copilot or what we walked through in this workshop. All right, so let's see. Someone did not get the checked-in mail for this particular workshop. If you didn't receive the email and you filled out the form, I would open up a ticket with MLH in the Discord. I don't know why that happened. I'm like 99% sure that it like I gave you all the right link. I'll double check that in a second. I think that's the only other reason that could be happening. So let me double check the event registration link. Yep, the event registration link looks like it's the right one. So I would just open up a ticket to get that resolved. So yes, okay. So here on screen, we have additional resources for Copilot. For after the fact, I'm going to copy and paste this into the chat so you're able to see everything as we kind of walk along with it. Oh, that did not have spacing. But basically, here are all of the links. I might send those in a little bit less combined manner. The first one is Copilot Guides. This is a way for you to navigate different functionalities of GitHub Copilot in different environments. I walked you through Code Spaces, which is just a digital browser version of VS Code. But if you use something different, a different IDE, a different environment, Copilot Guides is your best bet to understanding that and kind of the quirks of your specific development environment. Copilot Examples will show you how Copilot can help your work a little bit more practically and more specific, different examples. We used a Flask app for this example, but there's a million different ways you can use Copilot in your development experience. And Copilot Config will show you how to configure Copilot to your personal preferences. We talked about one, which is using public code that's available in public repositories. That's a preference that I always turn off just because I can find it a little bit annoying when I'm on stream and there's a lot of like public code that's like automatically suggesting things through GitHub Copilot, but to each their own. Someone asked, I heard Copilot automatically fixes GitHub issues. Is this true and how can I do this? I don't know if it automatically does that. I'm not aware. That would be pretty awesome. But I guess it makes sense because it's created by GitHub. So it would be more familiar with the issues. I don't know is the short answer to that. Does Copilot hallucinate? I would say no, maybe just like the average amount of like silly responses or kind of like errors that you're getting from a GPT. But I found Copilot to be pretty helpful. Shortcut keys for accessing GitHub Copilot in Windows. So I use Mac, but I believe it's just Control-I in Windows versus Command-I in Mac. Let me go back to the slides. I think we have it both ways for pulling it up. Starting a project. Here we go. So I think Control-I for Windows versus Command-I for Mac. And then you should get this little pop-up if the extension has been installed correctly. So yes. All right. Control-I, perfect. I am going to resend those short links in the chat so y'all are able to access the guides, the examples, as well as the configurations. I really love using Copilot. If you've ever tuned into one of my other Global Hack Week streams, I'm using it to debug things and kind of utilize similar functionalities across different, I guess, like use cases. Like as you saw, we had like pretty much the same logic for hours, minutes, days. I do that with Copilot during my streams to kind of like speed up the process. We're able to work on adding new things into our app. And when I'm debugging a live stream, you'll also see that I'm using Copilot to kind of like as a first line of defense. If it's not working, of course, I'll move on to kind of the old trusted ways of Stack Overflow and Googling my errors. But more often than not, Copilot is able to find a solution quickly, and we're able to kind of move on at a pace that is a lot faster than we were able to before we had this Copilot assistant. All right, so Copilot guide is the first link for all the various functions of Copilot in different supported environments. I showed you all some supported environments earlier. Here are different examples. So if you don't want to use it in Flask, if you want to use it in HTML, different programming language, you want to do it in Java, JavaScript, Rust. I'm not thinking of any other programming languages. Swift, those are a few. They might have some examples there. I don't know all the examples I have off the top of my head, but super helpful, as well as a configuration if you're trying to work on the configuration to suit it best towards your needs. As we talked about, making sure you're reading into all of that so that you can use it to best serve you as a student or a professional developer. All right, that is all I have for you today. I will stick around for a few more minutes to answer any questions. Make sure that you register your attendance for the workshop for this particular stream. I sent it both in the Discord announcement and earlier in the chat. This allows you to be eligible for any swag or points that this particular stream makes you eligible for. And I wanted to make sure that you are able to view that, able to kind of take advantage of that. And I will stick around for a few moments for any more questions, but hopefully you learned something and are able to use GitHub Copilot in your day-to-day development environment. I know that I do. Someone asked, what helps us to be eligible for prizes? I don't know offhand, so let's find out. So globalhackweek.mlh.io. Let's go to swag. To earn our basic swag, which is a sticker pack and a postcard, you need to check in to the event, which includes you need to join the MLH community Discord server, which I'm pretty sure you have access to. If you're here, if you're just kind of randomly tuning in on Twitch, you can join the Discord here. If you head to globalhackweek.mlh.io, there's the Discord button. You can get all set up there. Submitting an address. This is really important, so we have your right address on file. It's not getting sent to, I don't know, your parents' house if you've moved out of your parents' house, or I don't know, your old apartment, or I don't know, we just don't have an address on file, then we can't send it anywhere. And completing all of the registration challenges. So for the registration challenges, I just like getting everything completed, as well as a few challenges. Okay, so, and then here are the different items you can earn by attending different items, or by attending different streams. We have a character sticker, sticker sheet. These ones are cool. I have a lot of these from 2020 or 2021, I think. Postcard, some cute designs, as well as the hex sticker specific to Global Hack Week. So swag is free, and the timeline is this. The timeline is different depending on where you live. It's faster within the US because MLH is based out of the US for our shipping. So yeah. All right. Copilot is activated, but it's hallucinating. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more of an explanation of what you mean by hallucinating. And then someone answered my question. The sign up and GitHub Developer Pack are the sponsor challenges. Perfect. So this is what you'll need to do. You are unable to access the links I provided. That is odd. Let me double check to make sure that these are working, at least on my end, and we can work through that. It might just be that they have changed. Okay, so this is working for me. For Copilot example, or for guides, check examples. This is working. Okay. I would just go back and make sure that you're copying over the address correctly. You're not missing any letters or dots. There is a dot in between P and A for HackPack. But hopefully that's able to solve your issues. If not, a lot of this is available if you just Google, I think, Copilot-guides or Copilot examples. Perfect. Okay. It looks like we are just over time. So I'll be logging off for our Copilot stream. I hope you had a great time, learned something. I always love using GitHub Copilot. Hope you enjoy using it during Global Hack Week, and happy hacking, everyone. Goodbye.